The room was already full of noise before she ever touched the piano. Chairs scraped the floor. People laughed too loud. Someone dropped a cup and joked about it. It was one of those gatherings where no one expected anything special to happen. Just another ordinary day folded into many others. The piano sat near the wall, black and glossy, more like decoration than an instrument meant to be played. It had been there for years. Most people barely noticed it anymore. Sometimes children banged on the keys for fun. Sometimes someone rested a coat on the bench. No one took it seriously. She hadn't planned to go near it. She was only there because someone asked her to come along. She stood near the back of the room at first, holding her phone, pretending to read messages while listening with half an ear to the conversations around her. She smiled when someone spoke to her. She nodded when it felt polite. Inside, she felt calm but distant, like she was watching the room from behind glass. She wasn't dressed to stand out. Just simple clothes, comfortable shoes, nothing that suggested she was about to do anything memorable. If someone had looked at her closely, they would have seen someone who blended in easily. Someone you might forget moments after passing by. At some point, a small group gathered near the piano. Someone joked about how out of tune it probably was. Another person said it was just there to look nice. Someone else laughed and said, "Hey, why don't you try playing it?" The comment wasn't serious. It came with a grin, the kind people use when they expect a quick refusal. Others joined in, not because they believed she could play, but because it sounded amusing. The idea of her sitting at the piano felt funny to them, like a harmless joke to break the boredom. She laughed too, a short laugh, and shook her head. No, she said softly. "I don't play." That wasn't exactly true, but it was the easiest answer. Someone nudged the bench with their foot. Another person waved a hand toward the keys. "Come on," they said. "Just try. What's the worst that could happen?" She hesitated. Her smile tightened just a little. Her eyes moved from their faces to the piano and back again. For a moment, she considered stepping away, finding an excuse, disappearing into the crowd. But something made her stay. Maybe it was the casual way they asked, like it didn't matter. Maybe it was the fact that no one expected anything from her. Or maybe it was simply that she was tired of always saying no to things that scared her. She took a small step forward. The bench felt colder than she expected when she sat down. The room didn't quiet. No one was paying close attention. A few people leaned in, smiling, ready to laugh if she made a mistake. Others kept talking, convinced nothing worth watching was about to happen. She placed her hands in her lap and stared at the keys, up close. The piano looked older. Tiny scratches marked the surface. One key was slightly yellowed compared to the rest. The smell of dust and polish mixed faintly in the air. It reminded her of places she hadn't thought about in years. Her fingers twitched once, then stilled. Inside her chest, something tight began to loosen, just a little. Memories surfaced without warning. A small room, a different piano, long afternoons when time seemed endless. Fingers learning where to go, again and again, until movement became memory. She swallowed. No one around her knew any of this. To them, she was just someone sitting at a piano as a joke. She lifted her hands slowly and placed them on the keys. The first touch was light, almost unsure. She pressed one key, then another, softly enough that it barely carried over the noise of the room. A few people glanced over, amused. Someone whispered something and laughed. Her shoulders tensed. She thought about stopping, about standing up, laughing it off, and saying, "See, told you I can't play." That would have been easy. That would have matched what everyone expected. Instead, she took a breath. The sound of it filled her ears more than the sound of the room. She pressed down again, this time with a little more weight. The note rang clearer. Another followed, then another. It wasn't a song yet, just sounds finding their place. A conversation nearby grew quieter, then stopped. Someone else noticed and turned their head. The laughter faded into a low murmur. She didn't look up. Her focus narrowed to the keys beneath her fingers, the way each one responded, the way the piano, despite its age, still held warmth in its sound. Her hands remembered more than she expected them to. Her back straightened slightly. The tension in her shoulders eased. The notes began to connect, slowly forming something familiar. She was no longer thinking about the people behind her. She wasn't thinking about being watched. She was thinking about timing, about touch, about letting the music move forward without forcing it. Someone shifted in their seat. Someone else leaned closer. The room was changing, though she didn't see it yet. A few moments earlier, she had been invisible. Now, Without meaning to, she was pulling attention toward her, one note at a time. The sound moved through the space, steady and calm, asking people to listen without demanding it. She felt her breathing match the rhythm she was creating. Her fingers moved more freely now, guided by something deeper than thought. It felt like opening a door she had kept closed for too long. A silence began to settle. Not the sudden kind, but the gradual kind that spreads as people realize they don't want to miss what's happening. Cups stopped clinking. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Even the restless shifting of feet seemed to slow. She still didn't look up. If she had, she might have stopped. Instead, she kept playing, unaware that the joke had already ended and something else had quietly begun. The silence in the room did not arrive all at once. It spread slowly, like a soft blanket settling over everything. At first, only a few people noticed, then more. Soon, even those who had been deep in conversation found themselves pausing, unsure why they had stopped speaking. She felt it before she understood it. The air around her seemed different. The space felt closer, tighter, as if the room itself had leaned in. Her fingers continued moving, guided by memory and feeling rather than thought. She still had not looked up. She was afraid that if she did, the moment might break. The music grew steadier. The notes began to follow a clear path, gentle but confident. It was not loud. It did not try to show off. It simply existed, honest and calm. Someone near the front slowly lowered their phone, forgetting what they had been about to check. Another person shifted their chair so they could see better. No one laughed anymore. No one whispered. She felt a small warmth in her chest, the kind that comes when something long buried begins to breathe again. Her hands moved with more ease now. The stiffness was gone. In its place was a quiet flow, like water finding its way around stones. Each note felt familiar, even comforting. She realized she was playing something she hadn't planned, something shaped by years she rarely spoke about. For a moment, a memory surfaced so clearly it almost distracted her, a much younger version of herself, sitting on a worn bench in a smaller room, light coming through a window. Someone standing nearby, correcting her posture, reminding her to slow down, to listen instead of rush. Back then, music had felt like a language she spoke without effort. Life had changed, time had passed, responsibilities had grown. The piano had slowly slipped out of her daily life, first becoming occasional, then rare, then almost forgotten. She told herself it was fine, that some things belonged to the past. But now, with every note, she realized the truth. It had never left her. In the room, people were fully aware now. Faces showed confusion at first, then curiosity, then something deeper. Brows softened, eyes stayed fixed on her hands. A few people leaned forward without realizing they were doing it. One person quietly moved closer, careful not to interrupt. Another gently tapped a friend's arm and pointed toward the piano. They shared a look that said, "Are you hearing this?" She remained unaware of all of it. Her focus stayed on the keys, on the rise and fall of sound. The piano responded better than she expected. Despite its age, it held its tone. Each key pressed back slightly, as if meeting her halfway. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders relaxed even more. The music deepened, carrying emotion that did not need explanation. A small mistake slipped in. One note landed slightly off. Years ago, she might have stopped right there, embarrassed. Today, she barely reacted. Her fingers adjusted naturally, turning the mistake into something that belonged. That was when something shifted inside her. She was no longer playing for herself alone. Without choosing to, she had begun sharing something real. Not perfection, not performance, just presence. A man near the side wiped his eyes quickly and looked away, confused by his own reaction. A woman near the back crossed her arms tightly, feeling something stir that she could not name. The room felt connected in a way it hadn't before. The music grew slightly stronger, fuller, but still controlled. It filled the space without pushing. It invited people in rather than demanding their attention. She felt her fingers travel higher on the keys, then back again. Her wrists moved freely. The sound carried warmth, and with it, a quiet sense of release. For the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to look up. She didn't. Part of her feared seeing surprise on their faces. Part of her feared seeing judgment. But deeper than that was the fear of seeing expectations. So she stayed where she was, letting the music speak instead. The room had fully surrendered to the moment now. Even those standing near the doors had stopped shifting. No one reached for a drink. No one checked the time outside the room. Life continued as usual. Cars passed. Voices echoed faintly from far away. But inside, Time felt suspended. She felt tears pressed behind her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them back, refusing to let her vision blur. The music deserved her full attention. Each note carried more weight now, shaped by everything she had held in for years: regret, gratitude, loss, hope. None of it clear on its own, but together forming something honest. A few people exchanged quiet glances, sensing that they were witnessing something personal. Not a show, not entertainment, something closer to truth. Her hands slowed slightly, allowing space between phrases. The pauses spoke as clearly as the sound itself. She realized then how much she had missed this feeling. Not applause, not recognition, but the simple act of letting something inside her exist openly. The piano no longer felt like an object. It felt like a partner, meeting her where she was. As the music moved toward a softer section, the room leaned in again, afraid of missing even the quietest note. Someone in the front clasped their hands together without noticing. She felt steady now, grounded, present for the first time since sitting down. She allowed herself a small glance upward. What she saw made her chest tighten. No one was laughing. No one looked bored or amused. Faces held focus, respect, and something close to wonder. A few people's mouths were slightly open, as if they had forgotten to breathe. Their attention did not feel heavy. It felt supportive. She looked back down quickly, overwhelmed. The music continued, softer now, carrying the weight of that shared understanding. She was no longer alone in it. The joke was gone. In its place was a moment no one in the room would forget, including her, and she knew, even before the final notes arrived, that something inside her had already changed. The music continued, and with it came a deeper stillness. It was no longer the kind of quiet that feels awkward. It was the kind people choose, the kind they protect. Even small movements felt too loud now. She felt the shift fully, not through sight, but through sound, or the lack of it. The room was listening in a way that felt rare, attentive, open. Her hands moved with purpose now, not rushed, not careful, just sure. The notes carried a gentle strength, like someone speaking honestly without raising their voice. She no longer questioned whether she should be there. The piano responded with warmth, each sound spreading through the room and settling into people's chests. Some closed their eyes. Others watched her hands closely, as if trying to understand how something so simple could feel so powerful. Someone near the side slowly lifted a phone, hesitating before pressing record. They weren't thinking about sharing it. They just didn't want to forget. She noticed the movement in her peripheral vision but didn't let it distract her. Her focus stayed on the rhythm she had built, steady and patient. Her thoughts drifted briefly. She thought about all the times she had avoided moments like this. All the times she had stayed quiet, chosen the safe corner, convinced herself that being unseen was easier. She had told herself she didn't need to be heard. Now, she realized how heavy that choice had been. The music swelled slightly, not louder, but fuller. It carried confidence shaped by restraint, the kind that comes from knowing when to hold back. People in the room felt it. A man standing near the back straightened his posture without noticing. A woman seated near the aisle pressed her lips together, trying to hold emotion in. Another person placed a hand over their heart, surprised by the sudden tightness there. This was no longer just a pleasant sound in the background. It had become a shared experience. She allowed the melody to stretch, letting notes linger just long enough to be felt. Silence between phrases became as meaningful as the sound itself. Her breathing stayed calm. Her hands stayed steady. She felt grounded, as if her feet were rooted to the floor, through the bench, through the piano, through the room itself. She was fully present in a way she hadn't been in years. She realized she wasn't trying to impress anyone. That realization freed her. The music shifted direction, gently changing mood. There was hope in it now, a quiet sense of moving forward, of something opening rather than closing. People sensed it. A few smiles appeared, small and unplanned. Someone nodded slowly, as if agreeing with something the music had said. She felt warmth spread through her chest, stronger than before. Not pride, not excitement, something calmer, something closer to peace. Her fingers traveled across the keys with ease, guided by instinct. She trusted them completely now. She thought about stopping, not because she was tired, but because she knew moments like this were fragile. Stretch them too long, and they lose their shape. She wanted to leave space for the feeling to stay with people after the sound ended, but she wasn't there yet. The room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting without knowing for what. A faint sound came from outside the room, a door closing somewhere far away. No one inside reacted. Their attention was locked in. She felt emotion rise again, stronger this time. She did not push it away. She let it move through her hands instead. The notes softened, then grew again, like waves rolling in and out. The music carried reflection now, acceptance. She remembered how afraid she had been to sit down. That fear felt distant. She was aware now of how still her body was, how little effort it took to let the music flow. It felt natural, like returning to a familiar path after being away too long. People were no longer watching her to see what would happen. They were listening to feel. A few tears fell quietly in different corners of the room. No one drew attention to it. It felt normal, even necessary. She glanced up again, just for a second. The expressions she saw were not demanding. They were grateful. That almost broke her. She looked back down quickly, steadying herself, and allowed the music to carry her through it. Her hands slowed slightly, preparing without announcing it. The melody began to circle back, bringing with it a sense of coming home. The piano seemed to breathe with her, each note landing exactly where it should. She felt a deep calm settle over her, unlike anything she had felt in a long time. A calm that came not from hiding, but from being fully seen without fear. The room leaned in once more as the music grew softer. Someone clasped their hands together tightly. Someone else closed their eyes fully now, letting the sound wash over them. She allowed herself to feel proud, just for a moment. Not in a loud way, in a quiet, gentle way. The final section approached. She slowed her hands, letting the notes stretch, letting the silence between them speak. The music felt tender now, honest and unguarded. She knew this part mattered. The last few notes came gently, like a careful goodbye, each one placed with intention, each one allowed to fade fully before the next arrived. Her hands hovered above the keys when the final sound disappeared. No one moved. The silence that followed was thick and full, not empty. It carried everything the music had left behind. She kept her hands still, her head lowered. For a brief moment, she wondered if anyone would react at all. Then she heard a single breath released, slow and shaky. Another followed. She felt the room return to life. But it was different now, changed. She had not planned this. She had not expected it. But she knew, without doubt, that the moment had reached something deep, not just in others, but in herself, and whatever came next. There was no going back to who she had been before she sat down. The silence did not break right away. It stayed, resting on everyone like a shared breath that no one wanted to release too soon. She kept her hands above the keys, unsure if moving them would disturb something fragile. Then, somewhere in the room, a pair of hands came together. The sound was soft at first, almost hesitant. One clap, then another. It felt careful, like the person was asking permission from the moment itself. More hands followed. The applause grew slowly, not loud or sudden, but steady. It filled the space in a way that felt respectful rather than overwhelming. People rose from their seats without realizing they were doing it. A few smiled through tears. Others nodded to themselves, as if confirming something they had just learned. She finally lifted her hands away from the piano and rested them in her lap. They trembled slightly now that the music had stopped. She felt exposed, like someone who had spoken the truth out loud without planning to. She stood up carefully, pushing the bench back just enough to step away. The applause continued. She didn't bow. She didn't wave. She didn't know what to do with her face or her hands. She kept her eyes down, overwhelmed by the sound of appreciation directed at her. Someone near the front said quietly, "That was beautiful." Another voice added, "I didn't know anyone here could play like that." A few people laughed softly, not in humor, but in disbelief. She felt heat rise in her face. Compliments had never sat easily with her. She wanted to disappear into the crowd, to become invisible again. But something stopped her from moving right away. As the applause faded, a different kind of noise replaced it. Murmurs, soft voices, people speaking in low tones, careful not to shatter what still lingered in the air. She looked up at last. Every face she saw was turned toward her. Not with demand, not with expectation, with curiosity and respect. She swallowed. Someone stepped closer, then stopped, unsure whether it was appropriate to say more. Another person wiped their eyes openly now, no longer hiding it. She felt a strange mix of pride and fear. The piano behind her seemed suddenly very quiet. A person near the side asked gently, "How long have you played?" She hesitated. The answer felt complicated. "A long time ago," she said finally. Her voice was softer than she expected. "I used to play. I stopped." No one pushed for more. That alone surprised her. A few nodded, as if they understood more than her words explained. Someone said, "You don't lose it." She felt her throat tighten. Another person said, "It felt like you meant every note." She nodded once. Unable to respond, people slowly returned to their places, though the energy in the room remained changed. Conversations restarted, but they were quieter now, more thoughtful. The room no longer felt like a place where nothing special was expected to happen. She stepped away from the piano and moved toward the side of the room, hoping to blend back in. It didn't quite work. A few people stopped her along the way. They didn't crowd her. They didn't ask for anything unreasonable. They simply wanted to say thank you, to tell her how the music had made them feel. One person said it reminded them of someone they missed. Another said it helped them breathe again. She listened, nodding, feeling each comment land gently but deeply. She realized something then. What she had shared wasn't just sound. It had reached places words could not. That realization stayed with her as she finally found a quiet corner and sat down. Her heart was still beating fast. Her hands rested on her knees, palms open, as if still expecting the weight of the keys. She looked across the room at the piano. For years, it had been something she avoided, a reminder of choices she had made, paths she hadn't taken. Now, it felt different, less like a regret, more like a bridge. Someone sat beside her and said softly, "I almost didn't come today. I'm glad I did." She smiled, small and genuine. She felt tired, but not drained, full, but not overwhelmed. The event continued, but it no longer felt ordinary. People carried the moment with them, even as they talked about other things. It had become part of the room's story. She noticed that some still glanced at the piano now and then, as if it had become something new. So had she. As time passed, the attention faded enough for her to feel comfortable again. She stood near a window, watching the light change outside. She thought about how close she had come to saying no, how easily the moment could have never existed. The thought made her chest ache. She understood now that the fear she had felt earlier wasn't about failing. It was about being seen. And being seen, she realized, didn't have to be dangerous. Later, as people began to leave, someone asked if she would play again someday. Not now, not today, just someday. She didn't answer right away. She looked at the piano once more. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but maybe." The word felt heavy and light at the same time. As the room slowly emptied, she stayed behind for a moment, standing alone near the piano. She placed her hand on its smooth surface. The instrument was silent, but it felt awake. She breathed in deeply. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain: she would not ignore this part of herself again. The joke that brought her to the bench had ended. What remained was something real, and it was hers. The room felt different once most people had left. The noise had faded, replaced by a quiet that felt earned rather than empty. Chairs stood where they had been pushed back. A few cups remained on tables, forgotten. The piano waited near the wall, still and silent. She stayed longer than she planned. There was no rush to leave, no urge to check the time. She stood near the window for a while, watching the light outside soften as evening moved in. The glass reflected her faintly, and for a moment, she studied her own face. She looked the same. And yet, she didn't feel the same. Something had shifted inside her, subtle but firm, like a door that had finally been unlocked after years of pressure against it. She hadn't forced it open. It had opened because she stopped holding it shut. She walked slowly back toward the piano. No one asked her to. No one was watching now. The room belonged to her in a quiet way. She reached out and rested her fingers on the edge of the bench, feeling the smooth surface beneath her skin. She didn't sit down, not yet. She thought about how many times she had told herself that chapter was over. How often she had said things like, "That was a different life," or "I'm not that person anymore." Those words had felt safe, final. But standing there now, they felt untrue. She realized something important. She had never stopped being that person. She had only stopped listening. The thought didn't make her angry. It didn't fill her with regret. It filled her with understanding. Life had asked things of her. She had responded the best way she knew how. She had chosen stability, responsibility, quiet. None of that had been wrong, but it hadn't erased who she was. She pulled the bench back just a little and sat down again. This time, there was no audience, no pressure, no surprise waiting on the other side of the first note. Just her and the piano. She placed her hands on the keys and pressed down softly. The sound was gentle, almost private. She smiled. She played only a few notes. Nothing full, nothing complete, just enough to feel the connection again. just enough to remind herself that it was real. She stopped before it became anything more. That was enough for tonight. She stood up, pushed the bench back into place, and took one last look at the piano before turning away. As she gathered her things, she felt lighter than she had in years, not because something had been proven, but because something had been accepted. She stepped outside into the cool air. The world continued as it always had. Cars passed. Streetlights flickered on. Someone laughed nearby. Life moved forward, unaware of the quiet moment that had unfolded inside that room. She walked slowly, letting her thoughts settle. She knew the video would likely circulate. Someone had recorded it. People might talk. Messages might come. Or maybe nothing would happen at all. Strangely, that no longer mattered. What mattered was what she had felt sitting at that piano. What mattered was the way the fear had loosened its grip. What mattered was the way she had allowed herself to be seen, even briefly, and survived it. More than that, she had been strengthened by it. In the days that followed, she noticed small changes. She listened to music again, not as background noise, but with attention. She caught herself tapping rhythms on tables, humming without realizing it. She didn't rush to make plans. She didn't announce anything to anyone. She simply allowed the part of herself she had quieted for so long to exist again. One evening, she searched for an old keyboard stored away in a closet. It was dusty. A few keys were stiff, but when she pressed them, the sound came out clear enough. She sat down and played. No audience, no expectations. Just presence. She didn't play perfectly. She made mistakes. She laughed at herself and kept going. It felt easy in a way it never had before. She realized then that the pressure she once carried had been heavier than the music itself. Now, she played for the simple reason that it made her feel whole. Weeks later, she passed by the place where it had all happened. The room looked ordinary again. The piano sat where it always had. Someone else was standing nearby, talking, laughing, unaware. She paused, smiled to herself, and kept walking. She didn't need to repeat the moment. It had already done what it came to do. It reminded her that parts of a person don't disappear just because they are unused. They wait. Quietly. Patiently. For the right moment. She no longer wondered what might have been. She was focused on what still could be, and that was enough. The piano remained behind her, silent once more, but the music stayed with her. Not in sound. In courage. In choice. In the simple understanding that sometimes all it takes is sitting down, even as a joke, to remember who you truly are.